Hey everyone! In this video, we're going to share unique stories and experiences from people who have dedicated their lives to journalism. What is it like to be at the heart of events, to investigate and tell stories that can change the world? Each of our guests has faced unexpected twists of fate and real challenges in their profession. Today, they'll open up about the secrets of their work, reveal what's behind every report, and give us a look at journalism from the inside. Stay with us, there are plenty of fascinating stories ahead. I spent a wild night covering the takeover of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in Oregon as a TV reporter for a Portland station. It was right after Lavoy Finicum was shot. There was a lot of tension, and the armed occupiers were understandably rattled and angry. But the only people who pulled guns on us were law enforcement officers. After we'd interviewed an occupier early in the morning, another one came out with a holstered pistol, yelling at the CNN crew about how he said Finicum was killed. We caught it on camera. It was pretty scary, though he never took the gun out. A little while later, I got a call from the FBI spokeswoman telling me that the occupiers were on one side, the FBI was on the other, and that we, the media, were right in between them. If gunfire erupted, we'd be caught in the middle of it. The photographer I was working with and I immediately decided to leave. On our way out, we had to go through a state police/FBI checkpoint. A bunch of commandos pointing guns at us. I had my phone camera on the whole time, shooting it with my hands in the air. They eventually let us pass and told me to turn my camera off. I told them I did, as I put my phone in my pocket, leaving the camera rolling the whole time. By that point, I'd caught everything I needed. Made for a package I'm proud of, but I'm really not into risking my life for my job. The scariest times I've had as a videographer were when I was most identifiable as such. Covering different violent protests in NYC in 2020 could be scary, but it was worse in the moments where things got quiet. Without cops around or counter-protesters, suddenly photogs were getting looked at and harassed, and sometimes attacked by the groups. This happened in DC as well. The Capitol riot was scary, but the rally beforehand was worse for me. Walking around with a DVX 200 in that massive crowd, with Trump's echoing voice saying that the media is the enemy of the country. A lot of eyes looked my way. I just tried to keep my head down. Even on the walk over to the Capitol, I was approached by a couple of guys in camo with vests on. One came right up to me and just grabbed and checked out my credential in the middle of the National Mall. Lucky he was pleased that it said independent. Then they walked off. I was kinda paranoid after that, and def didn't do my best work that day. But I think the scariest, eeriest moments for me was on the 4th or 5th night of the George Floyd riots in NYC. There were just dozens of roving groups of people out after curfew, breaking into businesses and smashing windows. Midtown felt completely unsafe, like an abandoned city. I filmed one group breaking into an AT&T store, and one person just ran up and slammed something heavy into the back of my head as they ran toward the store. I was wearing a helmet, but it was a hard hit and hurt. I just kept filming and didn't have any more problems after that, but scary AF. Journalist of 15 years here, what it's like. Mostly your days will be spent hunting down good stories. If you're lucky and get a good editor, you'll have a fair bit of freedom over what you write. If you get a bad editor, you may get micromanaged, which can suck. You may have to attend crashes and disasters and make death knocks, i.e., calling or visiting family members of recently deceased people for stories. Much of your time will be spent writing, going out to jobs, talking on the phone, or sending media queries to PR departments. Most modern newsrooms will use a lot of online analytical tools to gauge what's doing well and what isn't, and more often than not, this dictates what you will be approved to write. What I love about it. I love that I've brought about real change to policy through my stories, which has directly helped people. I also recently helped a young family get a home. It's amazing knowing you've helped do good in the world. I also love to write, which is essential. Why I warn people about choosing this as a career, though. I love being a journalist, but I don't love the difficulty of trying to survive financially, and I think this is something that should be disclosed to anyone thinking about this as a career. Is the passion for it enough? To give some perspective, after 15 years, I'm earning the same money a young family member is making at a walk-in job he got where he serves customers and stocks shelves. I'm not saying he isn't worth his pay. I'm saying that for all my effort, I could just go and have a customer service job. A friend recently told me I'm making what an intern makes at his firm. To add to that, I'm actually one of the higher-paid reporters. The industry has potential, but it's struggling to find its feet between digital and print, and the ways in which that changes what we write. There are very few ways to progress your career, so the dangerous part of that is that a young, cheap cadet is always available to replace you. And in my case, I know that my company is making it difficult in the hopes I'll leave for someone cheaper to take my place. The pitfall here is that if you sit on the same or a similar income for long enough, inflation will ensure you only get poorer. For this reason, many journals turn to PR in the end anyway, because it's really the only way to move up the ladder pay-wise. Also, be prepared to have a thick skin. People do not like journalists for the most part. We are very much taken for granted. You also need to deal with constant cuts, an increasing workload, and fewer staff. I don't want to scare you. If it's in your heart, go for it. But I just wish someone had told me of the downsides when I was setting out. Would it have changed my mind? Maybe not. But it's better to know. Oh, and my qualifications are in multimedia and journalism, and I also did work experience in the start. Good luck. I can share the perspective of someone who works in TV news in a mid-sized market. There's a lot of variety based on what time of day you work as well, but I'm just going to focus on reporting/producing/anchoring the evening shows, since I personally think they're the most valuable shows at just about every station, even though the morning shows are usually the most watched. We're super reliant on stories completed in one day, day turns, due to staffing shortages and poor upper management. Both issues are widespread in TV news currently. So if you're interested in being a TV reporter, you can expect quite the grind. We have an editorial meeting every weekday at 10 a.m., where most reporters bring 1 or 2 story pitches. Even when approved, there's always some chance the stories will be dropped in favor of breaking news, usually crime or fires. If your pitches aren't great, someone else, producer, web staff, anchors, or possibly the news director, will usually have something in mind you can pursue. As a reporter, you then go out, sometimes with a photojournalist, sometimes without, to do interviews and collect relevant video. The show producers will tell you how they want you to deliver your story. That could be live, with video and sound bites run out of the production booth, ace live, look live, basically recording a live hit, but you don't say you're live, or a package, a pre-record of your story where your sound bites, video, graphics, and your script are all edited together. You, and possibly your photojournalist or an editor, then edit that together and either prepare to front your story live, or your day is essentially done. When you find yourself with spare time amid the grind of turning stories, which rarely happens, you plan ahead for the next days, and continue to develop relationships with sources in the community. My station is trying to move to a 24/7 format online, despite not having nearly the staff to do that, which can cause serious disruptions to reporter, producer, and anchor workflow. Other stations have more established online capabilities, and my understanding is they have anchors and producers dedicated to breaking news between TV newscasts. Unfortunately, I've never worked for a newspaper, so I can't shed much light into that process. Are gone unfamiliar to you? I tried to limit that to the best of my ability. If you write for a good local news outlet/paper, you mostly spend your days on the phone with sources, trying to find out information, reading documents, watching government meetings, working your sources some more, taking lots of notes, and then figuring out how to write your story in a way that grabs people's interest. You're always kind of on the clock, and some days very on the move. Though lots of reporters these days do their jobs exclusively from a desk, which I hate. You get to see important things happen and talk to important people, though your friends don't often care about what's going on until you explain it. You're constantly under pressure from bosses to do more with less, and if you're below a certain age, you pressure yourself to share your stories on social media so people see them. The job can get lonely if none of your colleagues cover the subject or place you cover. But you also adopt a shared language, the news, that fascinates you, like a never-ending story that only you know how to tell. And you are paid far less than your peers in other industries, many of whom do not work as intensely as you do, because their work isn't consumed by the public every day. The demands of your editors and readers and sources can often feel impossible to meet, and there are days and weeks where you lose sight of what drew you to the work in the first place. Then you hit your stride and remember, reporting stories is really fucking fun. You become a sharper interviewer, your articles become more engaging and better informed. And you feel like you could describe any subject, no matter how complex, concisely and beautifully. Most of all, if you're very dedicated, you get to genuinely help people by telling their stories fairly, memorializing their loved ones, calling out those who abuse their power, and, above all else, keeping a close eye on the place you live by producing drafts of history that capture the spirit and character of your community. That's all I can come up with for now. It's a lot of legwork, a lot of emails, calls, following up, chasing people down. It's not just working 9 to 5 and then relaxing until the next day. There's a lot of research, and you kinda have to just take the time to learn new things, which is cool, but it's time-consuming. It's also a job where you have to produce. For example, it's not a job where you can kinda slack off, rely on coworkers, and skate by throughout the day. You have to be in it, and you have to produce something. Also requires self-discipline, organization, and you have to take criticism well. It's fun, but you have to really love it, and the burnout is real. You have to take care of yourself where you can, when you can. A typical day for me looks like a combo of writing articles, arranging interviews, and editing photo and video. I find most people's phone numbers through company websites or Facebook pages for businesses, although occasionally I get emails from people who want me to do articles for them. Depending on how much interesting stuff is going on at my town at the moment, I might spend the day filming a local event and snapping photos. Other times, it's a slow week, and I spend all my time in the office. Side note, for behind closed doors, stuff like crime or corporate developments, I would have to get info from the police and consult police reports in the case of crime, and talk to a PR person / call a phone number from a press release in the case of corporate or bureaucratic stuff. Sometimes I get assignments to cover a certain event, but my editor is never strict about things and mostly trusts me to figure out myself what's relevant to write about. Although he does kindly push me sometimes to cover challenging topics, like, say, racism in my area, but it's always in an "I trust you with this" kind of way. We do have to communicate with each other to make sure we aren't writing articles about the same thing. I'd say 60% of the stories I write come from me reaching out to a business or event coordinator in my town who is doing something that's important to the public. Yes, that's very much a plausible conflict for the character to face, especially at a smaller newspaper. It would be interesting to explore, perhaps, how the journalist would pivot to writing more complicated interview-based stories as opposed to what he was doing before. At my newspaper, I have a coworker who almost entirely writes about crime, so maybe you could explore something similar with this guy really wanting to pivot towards doing crime also, but having to learn how to cooperate with the other journalist and not try to steal her thunder. Depends on whether it's breaking news. If it's about something really important like an accidented road closure, then I try to have the article out ASAP. But if it's a feature story that isn't time sensitive, like say an article about a local chef and what he cooks, then the deadline on that will be way less tight. Same goes for long-form investigative stories, because those take a long time to research. However, journalism also involves coordinating the best time for something to be published, especially if there's a print version, but also in terms of SEO. So no matter what story I'm writing, I do have to keep in mind the schedule of when news issues are published. Our staff has to design and arrange the paper in a way that fits in the right amount of stories and have it ready a safe amount of time before publishing date. I use a website called Otter. It records interviews and transcribes them using AI. Literally saves me dozens of hours a week, because it's very tricky and time-consuming to transcribe phone calls manually. I must note that I am staunchly against using generative AI to write articles. Using an AI only to save time getting a phone interview down on paper is not the same as having AI come up with an article for you.